Hey, my friend, can I ask you something personal? Have you ever felt, deep down in your bones, like you were born old? Like your soul arrived here with a few extra lifetimes of experience already under its belt? I'm asking because, for the longest time, that was my story. I was always the mature one, the little adult in the room, the one who seemed to have it all together, while everything around me felt like it was spinning in a chaotic tempest. If any of that is making something stir inside you, that little flicker of recognition in your heart, then I want you to take a deep breath. You're in the right place. You're not crazy, and you are most definitely not alone. I think of this conversation we're having right now as a kind of beacon, a light finally shining on that silent, heavy crown you didn't even know you were wearing. So, as we talk, just let your heart be open. If these words feel like they're speaking the language your soul has been trying to whisper for years, honor that. Do me a favor and hit that like button, and subscribe if you feel called, so we can continue these conversations. And more than anything, I'd love for you to share your own journey in the comments. You don't have to tell your whole story, but even just typing "I resonate" or a simple 777 creates a powerful current of energy. It's a signal to the universe, and to every other old soul reading, that your experience is real, it is valid, and it is finally being seen. For me, it didn't start with a big bang or a dramatic event. It began, as these things often do, with a whisper. It was a subtle shift in the energy of my world, a quiet hum of wrongness that, as a sensitive child, I could feel in my very cells. It was so quiet, in fact, that no one else seemed to hear it at all. I couldn't have been more than 7, but I remember my eyes feeling ancient, as if they'd seen it all before. I remember looking at one of my parents and not seeing a giant, capable adult, but seeing cracks. I saw a soul that was fracturing, crumbling under a weight I couldn't name. Maybe for you, it was the bitter, metallic taste of addiction that hung in the air of your home, a hungry ghost that seemed to devour all the light. Or maybe it was the sharp, crackling sound of anger, a constant electrical storm just waiting to strike, making the floorboards hum with tension. For me, and honestly, this might have been the hardest part. It was the silence. It was a hollow, echoing void. The profound emptiness left by a parent who was physically present but spiritually gone, too broken to connect, too wounded to even try. In that deafening silence, something ancient inside of me, something deep in my spiritual DNA just snapped into place. It was like a sacred contract was stamped onto my heart without my permission. And in that moment, I understood a truth with a clarity that defied all logic, a truth that would become the central operating system of my life. If I don't hold this collapsing universe together with my own 2 small hands, no one will. Everything will turn to dust. And right there, in that sacred, heartbreaking moment, is when a child begins to vanish. I'm not talking about a physical disappearance, the kind you see on a milk carton. I'm talking about something far more profound, something completely invisible. It's a spiritual and psychological fading. It's the exact moment a soul learns that to survive, it must make itself smaller. It dims its own brilliant, divine light, so that others might feel a little less consumed by their own darkness. That's when I mastered the art of smiling, when my heart felt like a deep, cold cavern. I learned to swallow my tears, turning them into a hidden, silent river that just carved away at me from the inside. Have you ever done that? It's an incredible, tragic skill. I became a master of reading energy. I could walk into a room and instantly feel the subtle frequencies, the unspoken tensions, the emotional weather patterns. I learned to navigate them before I would even dare to speak, before I would dare to take up space. My entire being, my very essence, became the emotional thermostat for my entire family. I was constantly adjusting my own inner temperature, becoming calmer, funnier, quieter, more helpful, all in a desperate attempt to create even a fleeting, fragile sense of peace for everyone else. I basically got promoted to the role of adult, long before my mind, my heart, or my spirit had any of the necessary qualifications. And the crazy part, the world applauded me for it. "You're so mature," they'd say, with this look of admiration, completely oblivious to the fact that I had laid my entire childhood on the altar as a sacrifice. "You're so responsible," they'd praise, never seeing the crushing invisible weight on my small shoulders. "You're so strong," they'd marvel. But not once, not a single time, did anyone stop to ask the most important question in the world. At what cost? That question hung in the air for decades. This, my friend, is the invisible grief, the silent sorrow carried by those of us who were forced to grow up far too fast. And we need to talk about it, because those energetic imprints from childhood don't just fade away. They become the blueprint for our entire live show we love, how we work, how we see our own worth. And here's the hook. If you don't awaken to that sacred contract you made as a child, you are destined to repeat the survival patterns that once saved you, but are now, slowly and silently, suffocating the life out of your true, authentic self. It took me years, and I mean years, to find a word for what happened, to understand the mechanics of it all. Turns out, there's a name for it in psychology: parentification. But honestly, that word feels a little too clinical for what it really is. In the language of the soul, it's an inversion of the divine order. It's when the river starts flowing upstream. It's the moment a child is tasked with becoming the unwavering source of comfort and stability for the very people who were supposed to provide it for them. I wasn't just a kid anymore. I was a peacekeeper, a tiny diplomat in a war zone I didn't understand, constantly negotiating truces between warring giants. I became a therapist, a little vessel for all the adult pains, secrets, and confessions that my spirit was in no way equipped to hold. I was the protector, a small warrior standing guard over a broken kingdom, thinking I could somehow fix it all. And this isn't just an unhealthy dynamic, my friend. It literally rewires your brain. It forges new neural pathways built for survival. When a child is constantly in charge of regulating the emotional state of a household, it activates a state of perpetual, high alert. It creates a condition called hypervigilance. Your nervous system turns into this high-tech radar system, constantly scanning the horizon for the next threat, the next mood swing, the next emotional storm. You learn to walk on eggshells so gracefully that it starts to feel like your natural walk. Every step, every word, every action becomes a careful calculation to avoid triggering another explosion or another collapse. And in that environment, you learn a really dangerous equation. My peacekeeping equals their love. Love stops being a free gift from source and becomes a transaction. It's conditional. If you perform your duty, if you keep things calm, then maybe, just maybe, you'll be granted a fleeting moment of safety. And the most painful lesson of all? You learn that your own needs, your authentic feelings, your desires, they're dangerous, they're a burden, they're inconvenient. So you start to suppress them. You push them down into the deepest, darkest basement of your being. Their needs are urgent, you decide, so yours must be erased. And that's how you disappear, not your body, but your soul. You become a ghost in your own life, and in that empty space where your true self used to be, a new persona grows. A mask, a carefully constructed performance designed for one thing: survival. I became the good child, the quiet achiever, the therapist friend. I was the one everyone could count on, the one who never asked for anything in return. And I wore that spiritual armor so convincingly, so completely, that after a while, even I forgot it was just a mask. But you know what? Even with the best mask, the truth eventually starts to seep through the cracks. In the silent stillness of the night, when all the performing was done, something would hurt. It was this deep, persistent ache that came from the very core of my being. It was an unnameable sorrow that would whisper my name when I was all alone. It's because the inner child I had buried, the part of my soul I had sacrificed, he didn't actually die. He was still in there, frozen in time, trapped in the amber of my past. And he was screaming, silently, into the void, with one single, heartbreaking question echoing through the chambers of my soul. Why didn't anyone protect me? Why was I left all alone? As I got older and moved into adulthood, the symptoms of this sacred wound just got more complicated, more insidious. Does this sound familiar to you? I became fiercely hyper-independent. I built these massive, impenetrable walls around my heart and refused any real help because my deepest programming screamed at me that depending on anyone was the ultimate risk. I would push people away the second they got too close, sabotaging real intimacy because the frequency of genuine, unconditional love felt so terrifyingly unfamiliar that my nervous system literally registered it as a threat. I would even feel this strange numbness during moments of pure joy, like getting a promotion or watching a beautiful sunset, or even in a lover's embrace. I'd feel disconnected, like I was watching my own life from behind a pane of glass. It's because joy felt unearned, unfamiliar, even dangerous. And rest. Forget about it. I struggled profoundly with rest, feeling this constant, nagging guilt whenever I wasn't being productive. My worthiness was completely fused with my output. To be still was to be worthless, which meant I was in danger of being abandoned. And here's the real kicker. For decades, I didn't even realize I was still living in survival mode. Because when your childhood normalizes dysfunction, your nervous system accepts chaos as its baseline. Stillness doesn't feel peaceful. It feels wrong, suspicious, like the eerie calm before another storm. Peace feels like a trick. Love feels like a debt that I'll eventually have to repay with pain. This isn't just sadness, my friend. This is a complex, developmental trauma that fundamentally reshapes how you see the world, and more importantly, how you see yourself. Now, you might be wondering, why on earth would any child choose to take on such a heavy, devastating role? Why would they sacrifice their own childhood? And the answer is both simple and profoundly biological. It was never a conscious choice. It was pure instinct. A child will do anything, and I mean absolutely anything, for attachment. It's their primary survival drive. They will literally abandon themselves to maintain a connection with a caregiver, because to a child's nervous system, disconnection feels like death. So in the stark absence of real safety, my intelligent little soul made a strategic, heartbreaking choice. It sacrificed authenticity for the sake of belonging. I need you to hear this. That was not weakness. That was a display of profound intelligence. That was a powerful survival instinct at work. But here's the ultimate tragedy, the cosmic joke of it all. The very strategy that saved you back then is the one that imprisons you now. So many of us are walking this earth as these high-functioning, successful adults, while inside we are carrying these deeply neglected, wounded inner children who are still pulling the strings from behind the curtain of our subconscious. We overachieve to finally earn the love and approval we were starved for. We stay silent and accommodating to avoid the primal terror of abandonment. We take care of everyone else, secretly, desperately hoping that someone will finally turn to us and ask if we're okay. And that fantasy, that deep soul yearning for a savior, for someone to finally see past the strong facade and give you permission to fall apart and be held, that is the great, unmet need. It's not the need of your competent adult self. It is the primal cry of the child who never, ever got to be a child. So, where do we go from here? What's the first step on this sacred journey of healing? It's not what you think. It's not about fixing. It's about witnessing. The healing begins the moment you stop trying to change your past and instead turn towards it with radical compassion. It begins when you finally validate the truth of what happened for yourself. For as long as you keep gaslighting yourself with dismissive thoughts like, "Oh, it wasn't that bad," or "Other people had it so much worse," or the classic, "I turned out fine," you will remain trapped. Because "I'm fine" is the heaviest, most dangerous mask of all. It's the mask that denies the wound, and a wound that is denied can never, ever heal. Deep down, you know this. So what happens when that child finally gets a safe space to grow up? We become adults who can actually feel safe in a quiet room. We become lovers who can finally trust the frequency of softness and gentleness. We become givers who also know how to divinely receive. We become the kind of people who see our tears not as a weakness, but as a sacred release. We learn to accept a compliment without flinching and stop confusing the feeling of utter exhaustion with the feeling of success. This is the real cost of growing up too fast. If your childhood trained you to be strong at the expense of being soft, to be quiet instead of being honest, to fix others while ignoring your own fractures, you inherit a life where you are always holding your breath, waiting. just waiting for someone to give you permission to finally fall apart. But here is the profound, liberating truth I had to learn, and it's a tough one. No one is coming to rescue the child you buried. You are the one. You are the one who has to go back in time, through the corridors of your own memory, find that child, and hold their hand. You are the one who must finally say the words no one else ever did. You didn't deserve that. It was not your fault. You were just a child. And now you get to rest. This, my friend, is the sacred beginning of what I call shadow work. It's not about fixing yourself, because you're not broken. It's not about performing for anyone. And it is certainly not about bypassing your real pain with a layer of fake positivity. It is about turning toward the abandoned, exiled parts of yourself and saying, with all the love you can muster, I see you now, I hear you now, and I am not leaving. That is the reparenting process. And I'm not going to lie to you, it's brutal. It's brutal because it asks you to finally feel the immense grief you never had time to feel back then. It asks you to sit with the righteous rage you had to swallow. It asks you to honor the deep sorrow and the vast, aching landscape of your unmet needs. It asks you to weep for the birthdays where no one showed up, to mourn the innocence you lost while you were busy protecting the very people who should have been protecting you. But that grief, when it finally comes, is not a sign of weakness. It is sacred. It is proof that you are healing. Because what was once frozen solid in the ice of trauma is finally thawing. Let's bring this home and talk about how these survival patterns show up now, in your adult life, in ways you might not even recognize. You might be the designated therapist in all of your friendships, right? Effortlessly holding space for everyone else's pain, but never letting anyone truly see the depths of your own. You might get praised for your fierce independence, while deep down, you're absolutely terrified of being a burden to anyone. You might find yourself in relationships where you are constantly over-functioning, always fixing, managing, over-explaining, and then you wonder why you feel so resentful and drained all the time. Or maybe you struggle with boundaries, because saying a simple no still feels, on a primal, gut level, like a betrayal that will lead to your immediate abandonment. You have to understand, these are not your personality traits. These are not who you are. They are your coping strategies. They are patterns that were learned and conditioned into your very being. And the most glorious news of all is that what has been learned can be unlearned. But that unlearning can only happen when you stop idolizing your strength and start honoring your wounds. One of the most powerful things I ever did was to start asking my inner child a simple question. What did you need back then that you never got? And if you sit quietly with that, you might hear the answers. I needed someone to tell me it wasn't my fault. I needed someone to just ask how I was doing. I needed to play. I needed to rest. I needed to laugh without being afraid. And slowly, so slowly, you begin to give those things to yourself, right now. This isn't about fixing the past. It's about choosing to stop reliving it. This is how you stop looking for a parent in your partners. This is how you learn to tell the difference between the frantic buzz of anxiety and the clear, calm voice of your intuition. This is how you stop running from the child you were and finally embrace the whole, integrated self you are becoming. Carl Jung said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." He knew that we would do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing our own souls. But this shadow work, this sacred journey, it demands that you face it, all of it. The neglected parts, the ashamed parts, the scared parts, the angry parts. Because healing isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world told you who you had to be. So if you're someone who grew up too fast, please, hear this in every cell of your being. Your maturity was never the problem. The problem was that you had no choice. But now, you do. You can choose softness. You can choose to rest. You can choose to stop managing everyone else's emotions and finally start honoring your own. And no, it won't happen overnight. There will be days you feel like a small, helpless child all over again. Good, that's the point. On those days, let that child come home. Let them cry, let them play, let them finally be seen. Because you are not broken, you are becoming whole. And maybe, just maybe, for the very first time, You are finally growing up the right way, not through pressure, not through fear, but through the profound, unwavering truth of your own self-love. You never had the childhood you deserved, but you still have a future. And this time, my friend, you get to write it.